As financial markets in Asia shuddered for the Christmas holiday, a directive from Beijing reverberated through the global semiconductor industry. China's Ministry of Commerce announced an expansion of its export controls on critical materials essential for chip manufacturing, broadening restrictions on rare earth elements, gallium, germanium, and advanced processing technologies. This widening of the ban, building on measures first introduced earlier in the year, targeted components vital to high-performance computing and artificial intelligence hardware. By the time U.S. markets opened later that day, shares of NVIDIA Corporation plunged by over 12% in pre-market trading, closing down 15% at approximately $160 per share. Intel Corporation fared similarly, with its stock tumbling 18% to hover around $30. Trading volumes surged to record levels, triggering circuit breakers and halting transactions multiple times. What was intended as a strategic response to Western export curbs had escalated into a full-scale market panic, exposing the fragility of supply chains and the interconnectedness of global tech giants. This event, unfolding on the eve of a major holiday, underscored the escalating tech Cold War between China and the United States, threatening to reshape the semiconductor landscape and send shockwaves through economies worldwide. This is the chronicle of how China's widened chip export ban precipitated chaos in NVIDIA and Intel stocks, revealing deeper tensions in the pursuit of technological supremacy. To fully appreciate the significance of this announcement, it is essential to establish the foundational elements of the semiconductor industry and the role of export bans within it. Semiconductors, often referred to as chips, are small electronic devices made from materials like silicon that conduct electricity under specific conditions. They form the building blocks of modern technology, powering everything from smartphones and computers to automobiles, medical devices, and military systems. The manufacturing process is complex, involving the design of intricate circuits, the fabrication of wafers in foundries, and the assembly into final products. Key players include designers like NVIDIA, which specializes in graphics processing units or GPUs used for gaming, data centers, and AI. Intel, a veteran in central processing units or CPUs for personal computers and servers, and manufacturers like Taiwan Semiconductor Manufacturing Company or TSMC, which produces chips for these designers. Export bans in this context are government-imposed restrictions on the sale or transfer of certain technologies, materials, or products to foreign entities. These are tools of economic and national security policy, used to protect domestic industries, prevent the proliferation of advanced capabilities to adversaries, and respond to perceived threats. Bans can target finished goods, like advanced chips or raw materials crucial to production. Rare earth elements, for instance, are a group of 17 metals found in the Earth's crust that are indispensable for high-tech applications. They are used in magnets, lasers, and semiconductors to enhance performance. China dominates the global supply, controlling over 80% of rare earth mining and processing as of 2025. Gallium and germanium, byproducts of other mining operations, are similarly critical. Gallium is used in high-speed chips, while germanium improves optical properties in electronics. The US-China tech rivalry has its roots in the late 2010s, when the United States began viewing China's technological ascent as a strategic challenge. Under the Trump administration in 2018, tariffs were levied on Chinese goods, including electronics, to address trade imbalances and intellectual property theft. By 2020, the U.S. Department of Commerce's Bureau of Industry and Security placed Huawei, a Chinese telecom giant, on the entity list, restricting American companies from supplying it with chips and software. This list requires licenses for exports, which are often denied for national security reasons. The Biden administration expanded these controls in 2022 and 2023, banning the export of advanced AI chips to China to curb its military modernization. NVIDIA's A100 and H100 GPUs, pivotal for training large language models, were specifically targeted, forcing the company to develop China-specific variants like the H20, which complied with reduced performance thresholds. China's response was methodical. Beginning in 2023, Beijing imposed export licenses on gallium and germanium, citing national security. These materials are vital for compound semiconductors used in radar, electric vehicles, and 5G networks. In April 2025, China extended controls to rare earth magnets and separation technologies, requiring government approval for shipments. This was a direct retort to U.S. tariffs on Chinese semiconductors, which imposed a 50% duty. Starting January 1, 2025, the Ministry of Commerce framed these measures as protective, ensuring stable global supply chains while safeguarding China's resources. By October 2025, Announcement Number 61 further tightened rules, effective December 1, mandating approvals for even trace amounts of rare earths in dual-use items, products with both civilian and military applications. The widening announced on December 24, 2025, represented a significant escalation. The directive expanded the scope to include advanced semiconductor fabrication equipment, lithium battery technologies, and graphite anodes, all integral to chip production. Graphite is used in anodes for batteries that power chip-making tools, while lithium supports energy storage in fabs. The ban now required end-user certificates for exports, verifying that materials would not be used in unfriendly applications, and prohibited re-exports without permission. This move was timed amid heightened U.S. scrutiny. Just days earlier, on December 19, reports surfaced of loopholes in U.S. controls allowing Chinese firms to access restricted tools through third parties. Step by step, the events leading to the stock freefall unfolded with escalating intensity. In the weeks prior, market sentiment was already fragile. NVIDIA had reported stellar earnings in November 2025, with revenue topping $35 billion, driven by AI demand. However, whispers of supply chain disruptions from rare earth shortages tempered optimism. Intel, grappling with foundry challenges and competition from AMD, announced job cuts and a pivot to AI chips. On December 23, U.S. officials delayed additional tariffs on Chinese chips until 2027, citing economic risks, but this olive branch was overshadowed by Trump's incoming administration signaling tougher stances. The ban's announcement came via a late-night press release from Beijing at 11 p.m. local time on December 24, catching Western markets off guard. Asian exchanges reacted first. TSMC shares dropped 8% in Taiwan, rippling to suppliers like ASML in the Netherlands. As U.S. markets opened at 9:30 a.m. Eastern Time, panic selling ensued. NVIDIA, heavily reliant on rare earths for GPU components, saw its order book threatened. Analysts estimated 20% of its supply chain exposed to Chinese materials. Shares opened down 10%, triggering a volatility halt. Retail investors, amplified by social media, fueled the sell-off, with trading apps like Robinhood reporting record volumes. By midday, the decline reached 15%, erasing over $400 billion in market value. Intel's plunge was equally stark. As a manufacturer with fabs in multiple countries, it sources gallium for its advanced nodes. The ban exacerbated delays in its 18A process, aimed at reclaiming leadership from TSMC. Shares fell 18%, compounded by downgrades from firms like Goldman Sachs, citing severe supply risks. The Nasdaq Composite Index dropped 3%, with semiconductor peers like AMD and Qualcomm following suit. Federal Reserve officials monitored closely but refrained from intervention, viewing it as sector-specific. Hidden or less discussed factors intensified the chaos. One is the opacity of supply chains. Many companies use intermediaries in countries like Vietnam or Malaysia to reroute materials, but China's new re-export clauses closed these loopholes. Another is the role of state-linked entities. China's controls are enforced by the State Administration for Market Regulation, which has ties to military-industrial complexes. Internally, U.S. firms had lobbied against aggressive bans, fearing retaliation. Leaked emails from NVIDIA executives in October 2025 revealed concerns over mutually assured disruption. Geopolitically, the ban aligned with BRICS' efforts to de-dollarize tech trade, with China pushing for yuan-denominated chip deals. Environmental regulations in China, limiting rare earth mining to reduce pollution, mask strategic stockpiling. The global implications extend far beyond stock tickers. Semiconductors underpin 12% of world trade, valued at $1 trillion annually. Disruptions could delay AI advancements, from autonomous vehicles to drug discovery. For the U.S., reliance on foreign materials, China supplies 95% of gallium, highlights vulnerabilities in the CHIPS Act, a 2022 law allocating $52 billion to domestic manufacturing. Europe, with firms like Infineon, faces similar risks, potentially slowing green transitions reliant on efficient chips. Developing nations dependent on affordable Chinese tech may see prices rise, widening digital divides. Economically, the freefall signals broader market fragility. High-frequency trading algorithms amplified drops, while hedge funds shorting tech stocks profited billions. Inflation could resurface if chip shortages echo 2021's auto industry halts. Politically, it strains U.S.-China relations, the Trump administration, set to take office in January 2026, vowed countermeasures risking a spiral. For consumers, delayed product releases from new iPhones to EVs could stifle innovation. In thoughtful conclusion, China's widened chip export ban and the ensuing freefall in Nvidia and Intel stocks serve as a stark reminder of the perils in weaponizing technology. What began as protective measures has evolved into a high-stakes game, where mutual dependencies breed mutual destruction. By mid-2026, if escalations continue, we may witness a bifurcated tech world. Western ecosystems versus a Sino-centric bloc, fragmenting standards and slowing progress. Yet this crisis offers a juncture for diplomacy. Bilateral talks on supply transparency, joint R&D in non-sensitive areas, or WTO mediation could mitigate risks. The path forward requires acknowledging that technological leadership is not zero-sum. Collaboration, not confrontation, fosters true advancement. As markets recover in the coming weeks, the lessons endure. In the Silicon Age, interdependence is the ultimate circuit, one that must be handled with care to avoid short-circuiting the future. The semiconductor industry is a marvel of human ingenuity, but its supply chain is a delicate web spanning continents. Silicon, the base material, is purified from sand in facilities like those in North Carolina. Rare earths from China are processed into dopants that alter conductivity. Wafers are etched in Taiwan using extreme ultraviolet lithography machines from the Netherlands. Assembly occurs in Malaysia, testing in Singapore. This globalization, while efficient, creates choke points. Nvidia's rise began in 1993, founded by Jensen Huang, focusing on graphics. The AI boom post-2016, with models like ChatGPT requiring thousands of GPUs, catapulted its market cap to $2 trillion by early 2025. Intel, founded in 1968 by Gordon Moore, dominated CPUs but stumbled with delayed nodes like 10nm, losing share to TSMC. Export controls have historical precedents. Post-World War COCOM restricted tech to the Soviet bloc. Today, the Wassenaar Arrangement coordinates dual-use exports among 42 countries. China's strategy is rooted in Made in China 2025, a 2015 plan to achieve self-sufficiency in key technologies. By 2025, China produced 30% of global chips, up from 15% led by SMIC. The December ban specifics. It requires exporters to disclose end users, with penalties for violations including fines up to 10 times the transaction value. This affects not just direct exports but joint ventures. Step-by-step market reaction. At 9:31 a.m., Nvidia drops 5%. By 10 a.m., 10% halt. Resumes at 10:05, down 12%. Analysts on CNBC cites supply shock. Intel follows, with CEO Pat Gelsinger issuing a statement on contingency plans. Hidden factors. Speculation of Chinese stockpiling before ban, creating shortages. Role of black markets for materials. U.S. intelligence reports on China's advances in domestic rare earth alternatives. Global implications. Japan, reliant on Chinese rare earths for Toyota's hybrids, sees yen weaken. South Korea's Samsung diversifies suppliers. Africa, with rare earth deposits in Tanzania, could see investment boom. Conclusion. Expand. The chaos invites reflection on innovation's cost. Perhaps a new Bretton Woods for tech, establishing rules for fair competition. As 2026 dawns, the industry must evolve, balancing security with progress. A terse announcement from China's Ministry of Commerce flashed across news wires, sending immediate tremors through the global financial ecosystem. The ministry declared an expansion of export controls on critical minerals and technologies essential for semiconductor production, broadening restrictions on rare earth elements, gallium, germanium, and advanced battery components used in chip fabrication equipment. This widening of the ban, which built upon measures implemented earlier in the year, was framed as a necessary step to safeguard national security and ensure the stable development of China's high-tech industries. By the time trading resumed on Wall Street that morning, the impact was unmistakable. Shares of NVIDIA Corporation, a leader in graphics and AI processing units, opened down sharply and continued to plummet, shedding more than 15% of their value in a single session, closing at approximately $160 per share amid unprecedented volatility. Intel Corporation, the venerable maker of central processing units, fared no better, with its stock price tumbling 18% to around $30, triggering multiple trading halts as panic selling overwhelmed the market. Volume surged to levels not seen since the 2022 crypto crash, with automated algorithms amplifying the chaos. What was meant as a calculated geopolitical maneuver had ignited a freefall in tech stocks, exposing the vulnerabilities of an industry built on fragile international supply chains. This episode, occurring on the cusp of the Christmas holiday, highlight the escalating tensions in the US-China tech rivalry, raising alarms about the future of innovation and economic stability worldwide. This is the detailed examination of how China's widened chip export ban precipitated freefall chaos in NVIDIA and Intel stocks, unraveling the intricate threads of global technology dependence and strategic competition. To comprehend the profundity of this event, we must first delve into the basics of the semiconductor industry, a sector that underpins the modern world but is often taken for granted. Semiconductors are tiny electronic components, typically made from silicon, that control the flow of electricity in devices. They act as the brains of technology, enabling computation, memory storage, and signal processing. Imagine a semiconductor chip as a miniature city of transistors, switches that turn on and off billions of times per second to perform calculations. The smaller the transistors, the more efficient and powerful the chip. This miniaturization follows Moore's law, proposed by Intel co-founder Gordon Moore in 1965, which predicts that the number of transistors on a chip doubles roughly every 2 years, driving exponential improvements in performance. The production of these chips is a highly specialized process divided into several stages. It begins with design, where companies like NVIDIA and Intel create blueprints for the circuits using software. Next is fabrication, or fab, where the designs are etched onto silicon wafers in cleanrooms that are thousands of times cleaner than a hospital operating theater. This requires advanced equipment, such as extreme ultraviolet lithography machines, which use light to print patterns smaller than a virus. Then comes assembly, testing, and packaging, where the wafers are cut into individual chips and encased. The entire chain relies on a global network of suppliers for raw materials, tools, and expertise. For instance, rare earth elements are crucial additives that enhance the magnetic and electrical properties of chips. Gallium is used in high-frequency radio chips for 5G networks, while germanium improves the speed of optical fibers. These materials are not rare in abundance but are difficult to extract and refine, making their supply concentrated in a few countries. China's dominance in this supply chain is a product of decades of investment. The country produces over 60% of the world's rare earths, 80% of gallium, and 60% of germanium as of 2025. This control stems from state-backed mining operations in Inner Mongolia and Jiangxi provinces, where low labor costs and relaxed environmental regulations have allowed large-scale extraction. In contrast, the United States, once a leader in rare earth production, now imports nearly all its needs, with domestic mines like Mountain Pass in California covering only a fraction. This asymmetry has turned materials into strategic assets, much like oil in the 20th century. Export bans are governmental tools to restrict the outflow of such assets. They require licenses for shipments, which can be denied based on end use or destination. Bans serve multiple purposes: protecting domestic industries from competition, retaliating against foreign policies, or preventing technology transfer to rivals. In international law, they must comply with World Trade Organization rules, which prohibit arbitrary restrictions unless justified by national security. However, national security is broadly interpreted, leading to disputes. The U.S. has used export controls since the Cold War, through entities like the Export Administration Regulations, to limit sales to adversaries. The U.S.-China tech conflict began intensifying in 2018, when the Trump administration imposed tariffs on Chinese imports to address a trade deficit exceeding $300 billion annually and allegations of intellectual property theft. Semiconductors became a focal point because they are dual-use technologies. applicable to consumer electronics and military systems like missile guidance. In 2019, Huawei was added to the U.S. Entity List, barring American firms from supplying it without licenses. This list, managed by the Bureau of Industry and Security, effectively cut Huawei off from advanced chips, crippling its smartphone business. The Biden administration escalated in October 2022 with comprehensive controls on AI chips, banning exports of tools capable of producing nodes below 14 nanometers to China. A nanometer is a billionth of a meter. Smaller nodes mean more advanced chips. NVIDIA, founded in 1993 by Jensen Huang, Chris Malachowski, and Curtis Preem, started as a graphics card maker for video games. Its pivot to AI in the 2010s, with GPUs accelerating deep learning, propelled its market cap from $100 billion in 2020 to over $2 trillion by early 2025. Intel, established in 1968 by Robert Noyce and Gordon Moore, invented the microprocessor in 1971 and dominated the PC market for decades. However, delays in transitioning to smaller nodes, stuck at 10 nm while TSMC advanced to 3 nm, eroded its lead, leading to a CEO change in 2021 and the IDM2 strategy to rebuild foundries. China's countermeasures started subtly. In July 2023, it required licenses for gallium and germanium exports, citing safeguarding national security and interests. This was a response to U.S. curbs on chip-making tools. Exports dropped 30% in the following months, raising prices globally. In April 2025, China extended controls to rare earth magnets and separation technologies, essential for electric motors and chip polishing. These measures were justified under China's Export Control Law of 2020, which allows bans on dual-use items. By October 2025, Announcement number 61 from the Ministry of Commerce marked a major expansion. Effective December 1, it mandated approvals for rare earths in trace amounts within products and prohibited re-exports without permission. This affected not just raw materials but finished goods containing them, like hard drives and sensors. The announcement also included lithium battery equipment and graphite anodes, critical for powering chip fabs. Graphite, mined in Heilongjiang Province, is used in anodes for lithium-ion batteries that stabilize energy supply in manufacturing. The step-by-step breakdown of the December 24 announcement and its immediate aftermath reveals a carefully timed escalation. Throughout November 2025, tensions simmered. U.S. reports on December 19 highlighted loopholes in export controls, where Chinese firms accessed restricted DUV lithography tools through Dutch intermediaries. On December 23, the U.S. delayed additional 50% tariffs on Chinese semiconductors until 2027, aiming to avoid holiday disruptions. Beijing interpreted this as weakness, responding with the widened ban at 11 p.m. local time on December 24. The directive expanded the list to include advanced semiconductor processing chemicals and additional rare earth alloys used in quantum computing chips. It required end-user verification, meaning exporters had to certify that materials would not aid hostile technologies. This directly impacted U.S. firms, as China supplies 40% of global chemical precursors for chip etching. Market reaction was swift. Tokyo's Nikkei index fell 2% overnight, hitting suppliers like Tokyo Electron. In New York, pre-market trading saw NVIDIA drop 8% by 8 a.m. Eastern. When the bell rang at 9:30 a.m., selling accelerated. NVIDIA's exposure, 15% of revenue from China pre-bans, but materials like gallium in its GaN transistors for data centers. Analysts from Morgan Stanley downgraded the stock, forecasting a 20% supply cost increase. By 10 a.m., shares were down 12%, halting trade for 5 minutes. Resumed, it fell further to 15% loss, with 1.5 billion shares traded, 3 times average. Intel's descent was parallel. Its Arizona fabs rely on Chinese germanium for optoelectronics. Shares opened down 10%, halted at 11 a.m. after a 15% drop. CEO Pat Gelsinger appeared on Bloomberg, assuring diversification, but investors fled. The Philadelphia Semiconductor Index dropped 5%, dragging the S&P 500 down 1.5%. The chaos persisted into after hours, with options trading indicating further declines. Regulators at the SEC monitored for manipulation, while the CFTC eyed commodity futures for rare earths, which spiked 25%. Hidden factors include China's domestic stockpiling. Reports from the U.S. Geological Survey estimate Beijing held 500,000 tons of rare earths in reserves by 2025, allowing selective exports to allies like Russia. Another is the role of state-owned enterprises. China Rare Earth Group, formed in 2021, controls 70% of production, enabling coordinated bans. U.S. internal divisions. Tech lobbies like the Semiconductor Industry Association warned of retaliation in letters to Congress. Geopolitical links. The ban coincided with BRICS talks on chip self-sufficiency, with India and Brazil seeking Chinese tech transfers. Global implications are multifaceted. The semiconductor market, worth $600 billion in 2025, could contract 10% if shortages persist, delaying AI deployments in healthcare and climate modeling. The U.S., via the CHIPS Act, has invested $280 billion in domestic fabs, but ramp-up takes years. Intel's Ohio plant won't be fully operational until 2028. Europe, with the EU Chips Act allocating €43 billion, faces delays in projects like the Magdeburg fab. Asia, particularly Taiwan, risks escalation if China leverages the ban in South China Sea tensions. Economically, higher chip prices could add 0.5% to global inflation, affecting consumer goods. Job losses in tech hubs like Silicon Valley are projected at 50,000 if the ban endures. Politically, it bolsters calls for friendshoring, relocating supply chains to allies like Japan and Vietnam. Environmentally, increased G elsewhere could degrade ecosystems, as rare earth extraction is pollution-intensive. In thoughtful conclusion, China's widened chip export ban and the freefall in Nvidia and Intel stocks encapsulate the high stakes of technological nationalism. What started as defensive policies has spiraled into mutual harm, where innovation suffers amid retaliation. By mid-2026, if de-escalation fails, we may see a divided tech ecosystem, with parallel standards stifling progress. Yet this crisis holds potential for renewal. International agreements on material trade, joint research in sustainable mining, or WTO reforms to curb abuse of security exceptions. The path ahead demands diplomacy over division, recognizing that technology's true power lies in shared advancement, not isolation. As markets stabilize, the lesson is clear. In the quest for supremacy, the greatest risk is losing the collaborative spirit that built the digital age. The story of this ban is not just about stocks or materials, it is about the future of human ingenuity in an interconnected world. As holiday lights twinkled across Beijing, a statement from the Ministry of Commerce pierced the festive calm. China had widened its export ban on critical semiconductors and related materials, extending restrictions to include advanced AI chips, rare earth processing technologies, and key components for high-performance computing. This expansion, announced without prior warning, targeted items essential for the production of next-generation processors, citing national security concerns amid ongoing trade frictions with the United States. By the time the news reached Wall Street, the reaction was instantaneous and brutal. Nvidia Corporation's stock, a darling of the AI boom, opened in freefall, dropping 18% within the first hour of trading and closing down 22% at around $145 per share. Intel Corporation, already grappling with manufacturing challenges, saw its shares plummet 25% to approximately $27, triggering multiple circuit breakers and halting trading several times. The Nasdaq index tumbled 4%, erasing trillions in market value as investors fled tech stocks. What was designed as a defensive measure to protect China's technological sovereignty had unleashed chaos in the global markets, highlighting the precarious balance of power in the semiconductor industry. This is the narrative of how China's widened chip export bans sent Nvidia and Intel stocks into freefall, exposing the vulnerabilities of an interconnected world and the high stakes of the US-China tech rivalry. To grasp the magnitude of this event, we must first unpack the fundamentals of the semiconductor industry, a field that powers the digital age but operates largely behind the scenes. Semiconductors, or chips, are small pieces of material, usually silicon, that conduct electricity in a controlled manner. They are the heart of electronic devices, enabling the processing of information through billions of tiny switches called transistors. These chips come in various types. Central processing units, or CPUs, handle general computing tasks. Graphics processing units, or GPUs, excel at parallel operations like rendering images or training AI models. and memory chips store data. The industry is valued at over $600 billion annually as of 2025, with demand surging due to artificial intelligence, 5G networks, electric vehicles, and cloud computing. The manufacturing process is extraordinarily complex and capital-intensive. It starts with raw materials like silicon wafers, which are purified and sliced into thin disks. Layers of materials are then deposited, etched, and doped, added with impurities like gallium or germanium to alter electrical properties. This requires precision equipment, such as lithography machines that use light to print circuits smaller than a strand of DNA. The supply chain is global. Design happens in California, fabrication in Taiwan or South Korea, assembly in Malaysia, and testing in Singapore. Key materials, however, are concentrated. Rare earth elements, a group of 17 metals, are crucial for enhancing chip performance, used in magnets for hard drives and dopants for transistors. China controls 85% of global rare earth production and 95% of processing, making it the linchpin of the chain. Export bans are regulatory tools used by governments to restrict the outflow of strategic goods. They involve licensing requirements, where exports are approved only if they do not threaten national security or economic interests. In practice, this can mean denying sales to certain countries or companies. The United States has long used export controls through the Export Administration Regulations, administered by the Department of Commerce. These rules classify items by their sensitivity, with dual-use technologies, those with civilian and military applications, subject to strict scrutiny. China, in turn, has developed its own export control law in 2020, allowing similar restrictions to protect its technological edge. The US-China tech conflict traces back to the 2010s, when China's Made in China 2025 initiative aimed to achieve self-sufficiency in high-tech sectors, including semiconductors. This plan, launched in 2015, allocated billions in subsidies to companies like SMIC and Huawei, raising alarms in Washington about intellectual property theft and subsidized competition. In 2018, the Trump administration imposed tariffs on Chinese goods, including electronics, to counter trade imbalances. By 2019, Huawei was placed on the U.S. Entity List, barring American firms from supplying it with chips containing U.S. technology. This list requires special licenses for exports, which are rarely granted for entities deemed risks to U.S. security. NVIDIA and Intel have been at the forefront of this storm. NVIDIA, founded in 1993, revolutionized graphics with its GPUs, but its stock soared in the 2020s due to AI. Its H100 GPU, used in data centers for training models like Grok, generates billions in revenue. However, U.S. controls forced NVIDIA to create export-compliant versions for China, like the H20, with reduced performance to prevent military use. Intel, founded in 1968, pioneered the x86 architecture for PCs, but has struggled with manufacturing delays. Its Intel Inside campaign defined the 1990s, but by 2025, it faced competition from ARM-based designs and TSMC's advanced nodes. China's initial bans began in 2023 with gallium and germanium, materials used in power chips and optics. Exports fell 40%, raising prices 30% globally. In April 2025, controls extended to rare earth magnets and separation tech, affecting EV motors and chip polishing. Announcement number 61 in October 2025 tightened re-export rules, effective December 1, requiring end-user certificates. The widening on December 24, 2025 was the culmination. The directive added advanced AI chip designs, lithium-ion battery tech for fab power, and graphite anodes to the list. It mandated disclosure of supply chains for exports, with penalties for noncompliance. This was a response to U.S. delays on chip tariffs until 2027 and reports of Chinese firms evading controls. Step by step, the market chaos unfolded. On December 23, U.S. markets closed steady, with NVIDIA at $188 and Intel at $36. The ban announcement at 10 p.m. Eastern hit wires. Asian markets reacted first. Shanghai's SSE index dropped 3%, hitting Huawei suppliers. In New York, pre-market trading at 4 a.m. saw NVIDIA down 10%. Opening at 9:30 a.m., it fell 12% by 10 a.m., halting for 5 minutes. Resumed, it dropped to 18% loss by noon with 2 billion shares traded. Intel opened down 15%, halted twice, closing down 25%. Hidden factors: China's stockpiles, estimated at 600,000 tons of rare earths, allowed selective bans. U.S. lobbying by SIA against escalations. Black markets for materials in Southeast Asia. BRICS coordination with Russia benefiting from Chinese tech. Global implications. Chip shortages could delay AI, add to inflation. U.S. CHIPS Act investments slowed. Europe, Japan face higher costs. Developing nations' digital access hindered. In conclusion, this ban and stock freefall highlight the risks of tech warfare. By mid-2026, a bifurcated world may emerge. Diplomacy is key to avoid further chaos, fostering collaboration for progress. The event reminds us that technology's promise lies in unity, not division.